In this lesson, we're going to take a look at using Groundspeed. Groundspeed is another tool that runs inside Firefox as a plugin, and Groundspeed actually is a little bit similar to Firebug, although it gives us some slightly different capabilities in terms of interacting with the page. You can see I've got a panel that opens up on the left-hand side here, and we can see all of the form components. I've got an ASP.NET form, and there are form components to that form. If I were to select each of these components, you would see where they show up in the page. Now, all of these are hidden. I've got right up at the top here, it just says this is that particular value, and it's hidden because that shows up in parentheses there. I've got a bunch of hidden form fields, and I've got a search box, and that shows up right over here. And now I've got a button. You can see the button shows up right over here, and that's where it shows up on that page. Now, one of the interesting things about Groundspeed is that I can actually interact with the different components in the page and do some different things with them. For example, I could do a hex decode, I could do an HTML encode, I could do base 64 manipulations, do MD5 SHA-1. I could do a remove element. I could entirely remove that element from the page. I could also do this set lang and remove that from the page as well. You see it's no longer there. Now I could do a search and just say Windows 7, for example. And it's going to submit it without the language field being presented to the server. If I go back here, it actually refreshed the page, and now those fields are back. I could remove the button element. You see the button element is no longer there. There's a hidden button as well. There's several unknown buttons here, and it doesn't show up anywhere because Groundspeed can't determine where on the page they actually are. You'll also see different attributes to each component of the form. When I select set lang here, for example, you see the attributes. Now, I could actually edit this attribute. I could say viewable, for example. And now I've actually got something that shows up here. I could manipulate the type here and say viewable on all of these, and then we'd actually have a page that looked different. This is kind of cool and all, and I can play with all of these things, and it's nice, but what does it really mean at the end of the day? Well, what it means is it gives me access to some data that's in the page in a programmatic fashion, so I can interact a little bit differently with the server. What happens if I start removing these different components of the form and then submit the form? How does the server respond to that? We can see from using Microsoft as an example, their server actually responds reasonably well. If I were to change this data here to, "Hi, how are you?" and then I type in Windows there, I've actually removed the button from this. The button's gone, I can't actually do anything anymore, it's all broken. Apparently that there broke this particular page, so now I could just do a refresh on the page, get everything back, and now once the form comes back here, we've got the form back at this point. Let's take a look at this event validation, and let's make it viewable again. Now it's viewable, I can actually edit it. Let's actually add some data back in here now that I've got the button back. And now I can just type Windows in here, and we can see how it responds with the event validation having been changed. We can see again that nothing has changed here, but just because it works on Microsoft doesn't mean that it's going to work on whatever site you're using. You can manipulate hidden fields very easily using Groundspeed You can remove different fields just to see how the page actually acts without those fields or components within the page any longer. Groundspeed gives you some ability to actually manipulate how the page is presented, how it acts, and what it looks like. That's another useful tool as you're doing web application testing.